rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world.
My name is David Jacobs. I'm a retired professor of U.S. history from Temple University in Philadelphia. I have been interested in the UFO and abduction phenomenon for over 50 years. And I have, since 1982, I've concentrated on people who say that they've been abducted on board UFOs. Now, the UFO phenomenon is a global phenomenon, just the objects seen in the sky. And there is that aspect, that facet to the UFO phenomenon. People see the objects. They can tell whether they're flying or hovering or flying away at tremendous speed or disappearing. There's a tremendous amount of information about the prevalence of UFOs that are not planes and not obviously of terrestrial design around the world. The evidence is not subtle. You don't have to tease it out. It is more like a sledgehammer between the eyes. It's the evidence for UFOs is amazing. Actually, it's mind-boggling. But the critical aspect of this is who is inside the UFOs and why is this happening. We used to think way back in the early days that the pilots, in quotes, of the UFOs were just interested in Earth and they were flying around to see what was going on here, and they weren't landing or disrupting anything, so because they didn't want to disrupt the whole civilization like we would do with a tribal society. We'd come in and ruin it and all that. And so nobody quite understood what the UFO phenomenon was about. In 1957, a case came about in Brazil by an illiterate Brazilian peasant named Antonio Villas-Boas. And he claimed that he was taken on board a UFO at night. He was plowing a field at night, and he was taken on board a UFO. And this happened to him, and that happened to him, this happened to him, and that happened to him, and eventually he was released, and he never forgot it. It was horrible and it was terrible, and nobody believed that. It was one case does not a pattern make, and absolutely nobody believed that whatsoever. However, the person who investigated was a physician and a very, very intelligent guy. And the case was not even published in UFO literature until 9 years later, because there was a sort of sexual aspect to it that seemed that was extremely embarrassing to the people who looked at that case. Then in 1961, there was the Barney and Betty Hill case. And this was a couple coming back from, coming home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And they said that their car was stopped, essentially, and that they were taken on board a UFO. And Barney said that he had sperm taken from him, and there was probably ova taken from Betty. And it was, these people were Americans, and they were extremely sensible people. Barney Hill was on the state's NAACP state committee, and he was appointed by President Kennedy to a national committee for civil rights and all that. And Betty was Betty was a social worker and a supervisor and all that, and they were pillars of the community. They said not the same thing, but in the same ballpark of an account as Antonio Villas-Boas. Then other people began to come forward with these stories. It wasn't until the 1980s that we learned that Antonio Villas-Boas wasn't actually a Brazilian peasant. He was a law student who became an attorney and maintain the truthfulness of what had happened to him for the rest of his life. And then when that happened, we began to realize that the abduction phenomenon was much more widespread, and people were coming forward around, not only around America, but around the world. And then a guy by the name of Bud Hopkins became one of the great pioneer researchers of the abduction phenomenon. And he discovered that people were being abducted all the time, that they were being abducted as children, that they were being abducted as adults, that they had many abductions. I was taught how to do research in this area, which is primarily using hypnosis, but actually it's just straight relaxation techniques. And a person is not in a trance or anything like that, but they tend to remember what happened to them. And I worked in that field just at sort of collecting these accounts from people who would come to me. I never charged any money, and they could come as many times as they wanted. And until I began to see the patterns that were developing here.
So, David, it sounds to me that you're far past if it's happening and what's happening.
No, I'm just telling you what happened to me.
Yeah, well, can you tell me, what do you think, why is this happening?
That comes later. I've got an arc, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So, where was I now? I began to listen to these reports. All the reports were the same. It was astonishing, right? To the precision of specific instruments. I learned if somebody described an alien bringing over an instrument, I knew what that instrument was for and I knew what was going to happen, and they didn't. And now I didn't say anything to them, I'm just listening to their narrative, but invariably what I'd already learned happened. And those stories from around the world, I work with people from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa, from obviously from Europe and North America and so forth. And I realized there's never been anything like this in human history. But the question was, why was this happening? Why was all this going on? And I realized as the more I learned about it, that this was a goal-directed program, that these beings were here for a reason, and they were working to do something. They were not just examining us, they weren't trying to figure out what makes us tick or anything like that. They had their own agenda. And it had three aspects to it. It was global, it was intergenerational. If a person is an abductee, their mother or their father or both were abductees beforehand. And when they get married to a non-abductee, because most people are not abductees, their children will all be abductees as well. So it was intergenerational and it was clandestine. That is to say, it was secretive, and people did not see other people being abducted because this is a very advanced technology, and people are taken into UFOs right through walls and windows and all the rest of that stuff. And except every once in a while somebody would witness it and would report back that they saw their neighbor flying through the window and into a UFO. And there are reports like that too, to everybody's astonishment. So the question still is why? Well, what people were reporting, what women were reporting, is that they were having an embryo implanted in them, and then after about 10 or 12 weeks, the fetus would be taken out. They would then be presented with babies. Bud Hopkins first discovered this, who looked sort of like alien and human. And they would be forced to hold the baby, feed the baby. Lactation had been stimulated in them already. And they would see these babies as young children, older children, adolescents, and adults. And there would be certain types of them. Hopkins labeled them hybrids, which was a perfect label, actually. And I was finding, of course, the same thing. And I was working with people who had PhDs and MDs and LLDs, all of whom, if anybody knew that they were saying this to me would destroy their careers, basically, but they wanted to know so much about what has been happening to them that they were willing to risk it. And what I've discovered over the years is that the goal that is directed we are unsure of. But in fact, the hybridization program has gotten more and more human-like. And I just finished a book, just published a book called Walking Among Us, because when I was on an interview show, people would say, do you think they're living here now? Do you think they're walking among us somewhere, these ones who look like humans? And I would say, absolutely not. There's no evidence whatsoever that they're walking among us. And I felt sane. I could say something I was sane in this insane world in which I was existing now. However, in 2003, after hearing the same accounts over and over and over and over and over again, I began to hear something different. And it was about these beings who appeared to be living here. And one person told me that, and he gave me all this information about it. I put it on the back burner waiting for anybody else to say the same thing without knowing that he had said it. Then another person said it, and another one, and another one. Then a woman said it who I'd worked with since 1987 said it. And I realized this is different. I'm hearing something different when for all those years beforehand I was hearing the same thing over and over again. And as a result of that, I realized that it is well within the realm of probability or possibility that, yes, some of them are living among us. I hate to even say that.